Good evening. Jurors have the weekend off before deciding whether convicted murderer Daphne Wright should live or die.
Testimony in the penalty phase of Wright's trial begins Tuesday. The jury of 11 women and 1 man must unanimously agree on the death penalty, or else Wright will spend the rest of her life in prison. KELOLAND's Lou Ragoose explains how the process will work.
Well, the jury actually has to take 2 votes. First, it has to decide unanimously whether the crime fits the definition of this aggravating factor, that it involved torture, depravity of mind, or aggravated battery. But if the jurors do that, then they must unanimously decide whether the act warrants death.
When Daphne Wright's penalty phase begins, prosecutors will likely re-offer all the evidence presented in her trial. Then they can start offering new evidence, such as Wright's criminal background, if any, and victim impact statements.
Calling family members to testify to the jury about the impact that this has had on the victim's family.
Former prosecutor Scott Abdallah, who's now in private practice, says the first hurdle for the prosecution is proving the crime involved torture, depravity of mind, or aggravated battery. That's the aggravating factor prosecutors say was present in Wright's kidnapping and murder of Darlene Vandergeesen.
Things that may not have been relevant during the first trial could potentially be relevant during the death penalty phase if they are relevant to whether or not this crime involved torture, depravity of mind, or aggravated battery.
But there is no clear definition in the law books for depravity of mind and aggravated battery. So if the defense uses its same strategy from the trial, Wright's lawyers will likely tell jurors to ignore the chainsaw dismemberment that followed the murder and to concentrate on the death, which happened either from skull fracture or suffocation. They'll likely argue that the crime itself doesn't fit the definition of the aggravating factor. Above that, the defense will likely call its own witnesses to present what's called mitigating circumstances, which in other death penalty cases have been evidence of a disability, a troubled childhood, or mental impairment.
It's really evidence to say this is to give you a better appreciation for who my client is and what might have caused my client to commit this horrific act.
If the jury decides the case is death eligible, then it will weigh the aggravating factor against the mitigating circumstances in deciding whether to give Wright the death penalty.
Again, if just 1 juror decides the case is not death eligible or decides against death in the second vote, Daphne Wright will spend the rest of her life in prison.